Good morning, friends. Welcome to OBE Journal, Part 9. And the 5 a.m. dawn course is well underway, and I'm starting to feel rather comfortable in it now. And I will proceed to focus. An email discussion last night, and I don't mean night during the out of body night, I mean evening before going to sleep, put me in mind of the history, at least as I have perceived it and to a small degree participated in it in past lives, of the interaction between what might be called the energies of pagan religion that preceded Christianity and Christianity itself, its uh, energies and its cosmic purpose. And some of you will be familiar with that interaction to some degree, one way or another. And it's as I, participated in it myself as being in past lives, uh, a functionary, a priestly functionary in ancient Egypt, and on more than one occasion, i.e., incarnation, and what we now call a Druid priest in Celtic pre-Christian Europe, probably Britain, most likely Britain, and a Christian minister pastor on at least 3 occasions in within Britain during its time of adaptation to Christian values and the Christian way. And I'm familiar with how the Christian hierarchy bureaucracy took note of the various pagan sacred spots and built churches on the sites of the old temples and on the ley lines and all that sort of a thing. And when one pulls the camera of history back, one can see through further study that many religions have done this. There's a renewal under new names. The old gods become the new gods. And a very good example of this is Tom Harker's Pagan Christ, which compares the Christian myth to the Egyptian myths and shows a startling number of similarities. And when I say startling, I'm not exaggerating. You can study that for yourselves, but let's say Osiris does come up more than once or twice. Have also kind of written on this, channeled Maitreya on this matter in the book, contained in the book Jesus and the Christ. And perhaps we'll revisit some of that territory now because I'm seeing, much to my surprise, I woke up a few moments ago not thinking of this, but I wake up in the mornings not thinking of a lot of things. It's only when I get focused here that I, some mornings I do wake up going, oh yeah, I did this, I did that, I went here, I went there. And other mornings it's like, oh, what happened? I better get focused and find out. So, it would appear that I had a brief but penetrating interview with Jesus himself. And again, from out of body experiences and NDEs, etc., the history thereof, which we have, you know, plunged into in the Average Folks in the Afterlife series, we will know that this is not as unusual as some people might think. It might be as illusory as some people might think. Um, my sense of Jesus is a completely unique being, although part of the sort of board of ascended masters, of whom, you know, Buddha and Krishna and many others are part. And they operate together as a team and independently, I might add, sort of independently and as a team all at the same time. And Maitreya talks about this in the book that I just mentioned. They all have their own ideas. They haven't lost their individuality, but they do merge with great frequency. And they make decisions and follow patterns and shepherd us through the seemingly endless evolution of our consciousness. And have our best issues at heart. No, sort of best interests at heart. Although they certainly put us through our paces and challenges in many ways. And Jesus is not unattainable by the questing soul. You may feel you cannot contact him because you're not worthy. He's too far away. He hasn't got time. He isn't interested. That prayer is better. You know, there's a number of reasons, and every one of them is valid for the seeking soul who has not the gumption to go the whole 9 yards. But you will develop it, and Jesus is amongst the ascended masters equally capable of dividing himself up into many aspects and you know, thought forms, if you like, who can deal with your needs. And I would not care to say how many aspects. More than 5 or 10, let's put it that way. And he also has a number of, well, you know, disciples who are well advanced upon the path and can be sent to you if or can be made available to you if you so wish. And believe me, their devotion is such and their love is such that they wind up looking like them too. Sometimes because they think it makes you feel comfortable, and sometimes because they just can't help it. And they just sort of, you know, there they are. And that includes plenty of spirits who may be emphasizing the feminine side of their nature at this point in the timeline of the planet. So be assured of that. There are millions of Catholics who are devoted to Mother Mary. And for them, she's equally as important in the pantheon. And so keep that in mind, you know, too. There's no gender splitting here. There's no, except by the male commentators that bring their human values to the front, which I'm not doing. Okay, Christian and pagan energies. Okay. I find myself projected to what I would call a psychic space, which others might call a room, where I am made comfortable, you know, in the most common of ways, in a comfortable chair, and sat opposite the man himself, Jeshua, Jesus. He doesn't care what you call him as long as you're polite. And he greets me with great warmth. And I try to return that greeting without turning into a puddle of tears, because the embrace of the Christ energy is straight to your heart chakra. And he can, without even trying, reduce you to a puddle of tears of gratefulness and love in seconds flat. And he's done, I've been there before, and I'm determined not to do it again. I want to approach this, with dignity. And he smiles, understanding that, I believe. He sees, he sees right through you, really. And I guess we expect that. So, there's another reason you might not want to encounter him, because he will see right through you, and all your little weaknesses and faults and doubts and black bits will be lit up, and you may not care to see them. He doesn't care, but you will. And I thank him for his kindness and time. He nods. And tell him of my discussion with a friend who has been Christian and was sort of appealing to the pagan energies for many years and training herself on that, and then seemingly back to something of a Christian lifestyle. And I just asked him about the bigger issues that brings up, and also you'll be referring to your own past, Gordon. And right away he gets it. And I said, well, inevitably, yes. And I said, but many of the souls that will be listening to this and watching this will have that journey, that zigzagging journey stamped on their DNA. So your remarks will be valued. And he says, of course. And he said, he's saying, okay, it's a commonplace to say that all religions lead by various paths to the same divine destination. And many of the pagan religions prior to the advent of the Christian religion were valid and useful paths to the enlightenment and of a personal unfolding towards the divine consciousness, and how it is to be shared, or how we would like it to be shared amongst mankind. There's a pause. The divine consciousness and how we would like it to be shared amongst mankind. We understood that incarnate souls in the infancy of their journeys would have troubles, difficulties, challenges, understanding and adopting that divine consciousness, as it would seem so far from their day-to-day lives and the struggles and oppressions that they had to live with. We understood that the structures of priesthoods and existing parameters of belief would be barriers as well as paths to greater understanding and greater knowledge. We understood this, and we pressed on because we could see the goal ahead as being worthy of many struggles. And we also understood that those struggles causing suffering in one life or another, in many lives, would be seen by the maturing soul later as useful, necessary, and ultimately illusory, something to be packed away and forgotten, mostly, as greater consciousness and greater understanding was achieved. We saw that process in terms of centuries, not years or decades. And understood that the incarnate souls would only see this long-term goal occasionally, and would very often be or feel oppressed by the seemingly endless struggles achieving little, or seeming to achieve little, as the tides of anger, desire for control, desire to manipulate and accumulate wealth over spirituality would repeatedly reassert themselves. We feel that mankind is better with religion than without it, that religion does provide a path, a stony path, an uphill path, a path with temptations and delusions, but a path that does lead to greater consciousness and greater understanding. And when I say understanding, I mean understanding of the inevitability and the necessity of suffering to, how shall we say, smooth the rough edges of the stone and make it a perfectly smooth, sphere. I ask about the panoply of minor deities included in many pagan worldviews. And he said, all those beings, those minor deities that you refer to, are valued team members of the ongoing progression of knowledgeable consciousness unfolding into mankind. The Ascended Masters never sought to depose them. The representatives of the ascending power of Christianity were the ones who sought to make them powerless, render them anathema to the new vision. We counseled, telepathically, we counseled tolerance, acceptance, understanding. And there were many in the early Christian days who did try that, who saw the value of the missionary embracing the old ways and the old gods and showing how the energy of Jesus Christ embraced all that without necessarily superseding it. There were others, of course, who wished to suppress, destroy, render unto, the rubbish of ignorance and darkness. And it should be pointed out that other religious worldviews prior to Christianity were just as repressive. Those who would not adapt and embrace and wished to conquer would themselves be conquered. Conquering breeds the return of conquering by another enemy. It's inevitable, it's karmic, it cannot be avoided. And I would advise, as a small historical note, to avoid conquering. Choose rather to embrace, because the karma of conquering is, as I say, to be conquered by another. Whereas the karma of compassionate embrace of another culture's and religion's values rewards one, or rewards with more embracing farther on down the line. And it is my vision that this continued endless embrace of other values, other cultures, other ways of approaching the challenges of the physical plane is not only the best way, it is ultimately the only way. Although we would not force that vision upon you, we would just allow suffering to do its job. Just as we would allow joy and pleasure to do their jobs. It seems at this point I give my thanks for these wonderful pearls of wisdom. And a smile and a raised hand in blessing is what I receive for my attention. And he stands, moves toward me, embraces, and I, like I say, try not to collapse into a puddle of tears, and take my exit in a rather more dignified fashion than I will do with regular mortals on the astral plane. Well, That was then, sometime during the night. After that, what did I do? What did Gordon do then? I went to one of my favorite astral plane beauty spots and allowed myself to be embraced by the energies of a wonderful waterfall, and enjoyed all aspects of its radiations, including the playfulness of the waterfall spirits, dashing about like children surfing down the water, down the splashings and bouncings. Filled with the inspiration that I had just previously received, I allowed it to settle, and the excitement blending into a more balanced reservoir of benevolent energy that perhaps I could spread to others. And after some quote unquote time at the waterfall, I moved to what I and others would refer to as the lower astral, where folks aren't so terribly happy and actually quite miserable, a lot of them, as they struggle with their self-obsessions and the karma of their negativity and angers, jealousies, fears that they were moving through on the physical plane, through various kinds of poverty, deprivation, and ruthlessness. They are oppressed, and yet they oppress themselves. And it's a complicated story how all these people end up there, and hardly worth going into sort of a pointing the finger exercise. So I know of several rather down at heels communities on the lower astral. And turn by turn, I hover over each one of them and spread as much as I think is appropriate of the Christ energy that I have been so gifted with, recently gifted, and just shine it upon them. So try to imagine that. We're hovering over close but not directly above, at a diagonal. And, those shafts of sunlight that you see on changeable days where it might rain and then be windy and, opens up, shaft of sunlight. And that's how these people will see that. They won't see a bunch of enthusiastic spirits jumping up and down. They'll see a shaft of sunlight or something that looks like sunlight. And they don't get a lot of sunlight down where they live, but it will sort of brighten their gloomy day. A day that maybe isn't described by them as gloomy, just as the norm. And behind that shaft of light is the concentrated love that the Christ energies are made of. Hopefully it will give some of them pause, give some of them a smile, give some of them relief, give some of them a minuscule vision of how they might move on from the unrewarding existence they feel themselves to be living. You will get thoughts like, if this is the afterlife, I'd really like to be, born again. It can't be. How could it be any worse than this? They're gloomy, desperate sort of places that are dark a lot of the time, and these people are living in areas, well, small towns, villages, neighborhoods of larger cities that are not pleasant, that are filled with souls who are quick to anger, quick to resentment, quick to ego assertiveness, all that sort of thing. And not all there because they belong there, but there's a lot of, why the heck did I end up here? Look at these terrible people that I'm forced to live around. So not quite a hell realm, but not that pleasant. And they need all the light they can get. So anytime you feel that you can indulge in this activity on your out-of-body travels, do so, because it helps them. Just a little bit. Shows them the possibilities of the way ahead, the way out. So, try to imagine that as you listen to these words, and understand that there are several communities that I sort of pass through from time to time in this manner. Sometimes I pass through as a guy walking through, because the astral plane is like that. There's free movement, mostly. Some of the hell realms, there's not much free movement. I'll explain that perhaps another time. But on this level, there is free movement. People do pass around. People go from community to community. The dwellers looking for something better and usually not finding it because they're carrying their shadow with them, as we carry our light. And it's not an endless existence. They do sort of graduate at some point, although it can take quite some time. And I've had a number of people who have studied with me who have learned to do this through prayer and meditation. And they will have a family member who will have passed into the lower astral. They will know this because they've meditated on it through their own addictions, lack of love, competitiveness, meanness, selfishness. And of course, they will always blame others. They always do. And they will come to me and talk about how they've practiced light meditations and sending light to the one who is suffering. And after some amount of quote unquote time, months, years, will feel that that person has been relieved of their burdens, elevated somewhat, and moved to a higher level. And some of you will be familiar with this process. And if you are, more power to you. And if you're not, try it out. You can send light to those in the lower astral. You may not wish to participate in this, shaft of sunlight hovering over a community. You may feel that that's a little too much for you. But if you have personal concerns, family members, cousins, uncles, whatever, that you feel are in this space due to taking the wrong paths in their physical existence, you can send them light in the form of prayer, meditation. Choose your belief system. I don't care. Love, light, it's all the same, and send it to them. So I'm rather enjoying reliving this, sending light to I think 3 different communities. I repeated the process three times. And I should also mention, and as is written up in More Adventures in Eternity book, you can hover over war zones in your astral body and do the same thing. You'll find other people doing it, other souls doing it. You will find sources of light that are shafted onto the areas where civil wars, ruthless, incredibly mean-spirited angers, resentments, vengeances are being perpetrated upon the various sides. And you can have some effect there too. As I say, you'll be joining a process that's already underway. It's in Africa, it's in Palestine, it's in Syria, it's in a number of places. Anywhere where it's been ongoing for years. It builds up, and it provides those caught up in the conflict means of psychic escape, even if it's not necessarily means of physical escape. They tune into the energies of forgiveness and mercy, as opposed to anger and eye for an eye vengeance. After that, I return to a favorite grove of oak trees, redolent of my druid incarnations. And something of a sacred forest. And I blend my energies with those of the trees, which, for for a druid is more than enough. Ancient trees are not only examples of the one tree, the world tree, but they are a brotherhood whose mysterious community can be penetrated, understood, and joined. And those of you who like wandering in forested mountainous areas will understand exactly what I'm saying. Such practice was and is a big part of my psychic reality. And the embrace of the tree is a big part of Gordon's being. And I invite you to join me for a few moments of meditative glory in amongst the oak trees. Allow yourself to feel their stillness, their lack of desire to move. Their focus on the moment of breathing. And trees do breathe. That may be an exotic way to describe their heartbeat, but they do. Feel that stillness. Feel that acceptance. Feel that understanding of the ongoing, unfolding, moment after moment of the consciousness of life on this planet, on any and all of the planes. It's all the same consciousness. Whether it's high energy, the high energy manifestation in the formless energy planes, where there are no landscapes or people or cultures or differences, where it is all light, a light of understanding, or whether it is in the paradise worlds, or the heaven realms, or the pleasure centers of the Summerland, or the painful centers of the lower astral and hell realms. It is all the same consciousness working out the various paths leading to greater consciousness. It is all one. And the planet herself, Gaia, if you would so call her, embraces all that activity within her being and learns from it, as do we. We are all little planets living on a bigger planet. Planets of experience, planets of understanding, planets of dignity. Thank you.